Okay. Hello and welcome to the Health Mastery Podcast. My guest today is Jason Prall. He is the co-founder of the Human Longevity Project. Jason, can you introduce yourself in a little bit more details?
Yeah, as you said, I'm the sort of the founding partner of the Human Longevity Project, which is a film series that we released in May on the internet. And the idea was to go around the world and find out what is contributing to the health and happiness of people that are living into their 90s and 100s. And so I sort of came about this through the practitioner world. I was working with a lot of people that have autoimmune disease, cancers, digestive issues, skin issues, hormonal imbalances, you name it. So there are all these chronic diseases. One of the things that we're doing in a lot of the Western societies is trying to resolve these chronic diseases. But, as I worked with more and more people, what I found was that we needed to teach what health is and where health comes from. And this is a drastically different thing than trying to resolve disease, right? So this is kind of what the aim and the goal was to show the things that are contributing to health and how we can go about living in a healthy way so that we can avoid these diseases as opposed to trying to come back in on the back end of these things and try to resolve them.
So your background is like a doctor?
Actually, quite the contrary. My background is in mechanical engineering, mathematics, science, in that realm. But through my own health issues that I started suffering from at an early age when I was 13. That sort of prompted me to figure out what was going on with me. And so in that process, I started to kind of learn what was going on and why the medical system in the US was unable to really help me with the chronic issues that I was dealing with. And so just through the sort of acquisition of the knowledge and understanding that I was gaining, I slowly began sort of helping others, providing slow advice to friends and family. And then it sort of, led up to this transition from going to mechanical engineering to, more of a functional integrative health practitioner role. And so I kind of dove headfirst about 5 or 6 years ago and launched my practice in that regard and then kind of snowballed from there.
And how do you transition from this to the Human Longevity Project?
It was easy to transition from my practice to the film. Essentially that was I had all these ideas and understandings that I was coaching people and I was teaching people these concepts, what circadian rhythm is, why sleep is so important, why we need to look at emotional traumas and things that are happening in our childhood. I was talking about these with every client. And so I thought, okay, well, these are lessons, aren't being discussed enough with people that have chronic issues. So, this was kind of the point, was to produce a documentary, a piece of content that could reach a large number of people and hopefully resonate, because it's fundamental things that we need to sort of get back to. And, even things like simplicity and slowing down and reducing stimulation, right? We're in this modern world that is full of chaos, and so we need to sort of dim the lights, so to speak, on a lot of this new stuff that's coming our way. And there's new understandings that are coming about because technology is advancing, right? I mean, this gets to the point of, Iris and the things that we're seeing now. We're seeing technology actually respond to the advances in technology in and of itself. So we have to realize that we're facing new problems today that we weren't facing 20 years ago, let alone 50 or 80 years ago. And when you speak to these people that are 100 years old, I mean, they grew up in environments, that are completely different than, I might grow up in the United States today.
And how the team came together? Were you the main person?
Yeah, I mean, it started off with me and my good friend John, who was a filmmaker, and he actually made a documentary film a number of years ago by himself. He literally did everything by himself. He was the only one. So
how is the name of the movie? I will link it in the comments.
It's slipping my memory. It is. Oh, he's gonna kill me. I can't believe I'm forgetting.
Okay, maybe after the show you can give me the link.
I'll give you the link so that people can find it. It's actually really good. It's called Extending the Play. So yeah, it's actually a basketball movie. One of our friends was playing professional basketball over in Luxembourg. So he actually had to fly to Luxembourg and do all these things. So I knew he was the right man for this job, and he likes to travel, and so he and I kind of sat around the world to get this done. And then we also have Joe Rignola, who is really good with film and internet-based businesses, and so he helped us a lot in that regard in the editing process, and then Michael Roseline as well. So we had a good team to sort of execute this, but we were definitely a bootstrapped company that sort of lean and mean, but it allowed us to get this done, because it's this, something like this would normally cost a couple $1 million to execute, and we were able to do it for a lot cheaper because we knew exactly what we were doing in terms of the content that we were getting. And at the end of the day too, we also got quite lucky with some of the things that fell into place. So it was kind of meant to be.
Did you crowdsource the project?
We did a little bit just to get going, get off the ground, but it was not a huge crowdsourcing effort. It was something small that we just wanted to throw out there to the people that we knew, to our friends and family that maybe didn't know we were doing this, and got a little bit of support to get us going. But yeah, we had a few just small investments in people coming in to sort of help us out to get going. But yeah, it was sort of self-funded.
Yes, and then you started with pre-orders, and now the film is ready.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we launched in May, and it's all available online for those who purchased, and DVDs are being shipped out now. And we ship not only the DVDs, the 9-part series, but there's like over 100 interviews with a lot of the experts and elders around the world. So there's a ton of content. There's probably 140 hours of content, if not more. For people to dive into, and for those who are interested in health, I mean, it's a gold mine. There's literally the experts in childhood trauma, experts in circadian rhythm, and molecular biochemistry and immune function, and you name it, across the board, yoga, meditation, childbirth, all these things that we included, because when you look at longevity or the health span of somebody across their life, we have to look at the entire picture, right? People think about longevity in terms of what's the process when I get to 60 and beyond. But really, if you look at it, longevity is probably impacted most by the time when we preconception, or birth until probably 20 years old. Those are probably the most important years when we talk about the health span of our entire life. So we have to look at things like breastfeeding. We have to look at things like
why?
birthing.
Why this years?
Mostly because that's when our organism is developing, right? So this is when our immune system is developing, our nervous system, our patterns, our social and emotional patterns are being developed. This is when our mitochondria are peak. This is when our gut microbiota is being developed. So a lot of our systems are being developed in these early years. And so imagine you're an organism coming into this world. The organism has to adapt, has to figure out, okay, where am I? What is this sort of new world? What is this like? And it adapts. It has to say, okay, well, we have a lot of stressors. We've got a lot of toxins. We've got a lot of chemicals. We've got a lot of angry parents. Whatever it is, this organism is going to come in and start to figure out the world, and it's going to adapt and sort of set the path, if you will. So a lot of our whole processes are established between the ages of, well, preconception and 10 years old. So there's even research showing that babies that come out with cords wrapped around their neck, right? The umbilical cord wrapped around their neck, come in with a more heightened nervous system. So they're tipped more into the sympathetic overdrive, which is to say that they're coming in thinking this world is a dangerous place, right? We know that kids that are adopted have a lot more emotional traumas that lead to behavioral changes, that lead to nervous system imbalances, gut microbiota, immune system challenges, because they came into this world without that fundamental love and care from their biological parents. So we have to recognize that those years are quite important. And this is why we can't just simply go to, a place like Sardinia, Italy, where we have a lot of 100-year-olds and just look at what they're doing. We can't just say, okay, they're eating this and they're, drinking that and they're doing this. No, we've got to ask them about their history. What was it like? What was the birthing practices like? What were the breastfeeding practices like? What was child rearing like? So we have to look at the entire span and analyze it and see what were they doing, what seems to be the healthy solutions, and what are we doing today, and is this in alignment?
So, what were the countries with the longest human lifespan that you
I
go?
mean, this is it's changing, right? So this is it's changing sort of year to year, if you will. But there's been some previous work done that looks at various small villages in a few countries that seem to have abnormally high rates of people living into their 100s. This is places like some small villages on the island of Sardinia in Italy, the island of Ikaria in Greece, the peninsula of Costa Rica, and Okinawa, which is an island sort of off Japan. But that's changing, and this is the one of the interesting factors that I think we have to recognize. If we take some place like Okinawa, which has been known for its longevity for quite some time, that is actually changing now. Their lifespan is dropping, and their health span is dropping. And so we have to ask ourselves, why is this changing? And it's quite obvious when you go there. You see McDonald's, you see Starbucks, you see the city is looking more like a Western city. You see that people are not living in sort of villages and in the sort of more rural areas. So we have to recognize that it's not about an area. It's not about a genetic predisposition. It is about what are the cultural practices teaching these people, and how much are they living in alignment with or in harmony with nature, with each other, and with themselves. And when you start to see that stuff shift, like we see in Okinawa, you start to see the longevity starts to go away. As the old people in their 90s and 100s start to die, and the new generations become 80 and 90, they're not living past that anymore. So we're starting to see things shift, and this is the critical and fundamental thing that we have to look at. We cannot simply look at these places with admiration, put them on a wall and say, these places are special, because they're not. The places are not special. The people, the culture, the history, and the lifestyles, that is what makes them special. And we're losing a lot of that.
Super nice. I was actually in Sardinia with my girlfriend a month ago, and what I saw there was that it was really a calm place. Is this connected with the longevity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is where the culture comes into play, right? So there are parts of Sardinia where the main city in Sardinia it's kind of hectic. It's like Italy. It's like the big cities in Italy, and then you start to go away, and you start to go in the mountains. You start to go in the rural areas and the beaches. You go up in the blue zone area in the mountains, and you find that people are very, very. They take these sort of breaks. It's a much slower lifestyle. But ironically, even in the city, you do see people taking siesta. You still see some of this natural slowing down. And this is a relic. This is something that is passed through the culture, right? So even when the city starts to get crazy and lifestyles get crazy, you still see a little bit of that healthy culture bleeding in, but it is going away. So I think this is where we have to look at and see what is the cultural traditions. And is it contributing to health? And I would say slowing down and this tendency to not chase the sort of Western mentality, which is that time is money, right? The tendency to sort of steer clear of that is definitely a healthy practice.
Super nice. Even with my friends, I noticed that the most healthy persons are the most calm, and they go through life like everything will be fine, money are fine, everything is fine, and they are not so goal oriented. Basically, this is what I see.
Absolutely. And what's funny about that is that there's a lot of research that look into childhood traumas. So kids, when they're, let's say 3, 4, 5, sometime in that time frame, when they are, let's say they have parents that are fighting or divorced, or they experience some sort of abuse, these type of childhood traumas will actually shape personality. So, or even if you have a mother or father that is distant, they're not showing you enough love. What happens is that children will find patterns or lifestyle things in order to get love. So they may be really good at the violin. They may be really good at math. They may be, really good at school. In other words, they start to excel at life in order to get the love and admiration that they've been missing with their home. And so this is what's funny, is that you see people that are really, really successful that have this tendency to sort of be unhealthy because they have this childhood trauma that set up this whole way of thinking and being. And yet when you have the person that's like, nah, it's all good, it's okay, no worries, it'll work out, you start to see that they are healthier, right? So this is the fundamental sort of nervous system that we're talking about, this subconscious, this manifestation of it's all good is associated with a calmer physiology, a physiology that's tending toward things like restore and restoration and rebuilding, whereas you have the chaotic person who very well may be very successful, may do really good in life, may be more unhealthy because they're constantly in this state of, oh my God, I got to fix something. I got to do something. I got to figure this out. It's not good, right? So you start to see these patterns, and it's very interesting when you look at what is really going on there. And it's not to say that any of this is bad. Personalities develop for a lot of reasons, but if we want to be healthy into our old age, these are some of the things we have to recognize in ourselves and see where they come from. And hopefully we can get into a more calm state and recognize that, yeah, it is all good.
Did you have childhood traumas like a kid?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think most people do, right? So they range from very small things, like a baby crying that the mother, let's say, was on the phone and just didn't hear the baby crying. Something like that type of thing happening more often than not, or could be very, very big things like sexual abuse. Those are more traumatic and usually result in bigger health challenges. But, I recognize them from my childhood. My parents got divorced. There's some things there, nothing too obvious, right? So sometimes even when it's not obvious, that's when we have to really look and say, okay, what happened there? But I can tell you that absolutely shaped my personality as a sort of perfectionist or type A person. I was a mechanical engineer. I was type A. I was going to control things. This was sort of my personality that developed because of that. I'm quite sure. And then as I'm able to look at that a little bit more and incorporate some of these lifestyle practices like meditation, right? Like even just looking at the trauma itself and trying to understand it, accept it, forgive. These sort of practices can be very, very beneficial to release that trauma. Vipassana meditation was one of my favorite tools to help sort of free that aspect. And you can change. This stuff you can learn to sort of let that stuff go, and you change your sort of default operating mode, right? And so, working with clients, I've noticed with dramatic autoimmune conditions and hormonal imbalances and cancers, you always find these childhood traumas, and usually they're pretty dramatic. So you cannot forget those things, and we have to at least address them. And there's a number of tools and techniques that you can go to resolve those, which can be quite difficult for some people. But ultimately, if we want health, this is something we have to go back to.
But do you become less successful this way?
I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. I think what I've recognized is that as I've let go of this illusion of control, and I've gotten into this state of it'll work out, it's actually quite funny how many things sort of just fall at my feet. They're sort of handed to me, on a silver platter. So I've noticed that, even in our project, even when we were filming, some things happened that probably shouldn't have happened. Like they just kind of, it's almost like we just got lucky at every turn. So I don't know. I don't know that we become less successful. I think we can still maintain this drive for success, however we define that, with the mentality of it'll all be okay. I think the control thing that we think is responsible for the success is a complete illusion. It's just the fact that we are so stressed out thinking we can control the outcome. And really what's happening, I think, there is that we're just working hard. So I think, putting in the effort and putting in the attention to something is part of the equation for quote unquote success. But the control and the freaking out over every little thing, I don't think is a part of success at all.
But maybe if you have big emotional problems, you're going to be much more motivated to succeed.
Absolutely. I think maybe the poster boy for this would be Steve Jobs, right? So he was kind of the epitome of success in a lot of ways, but he also is notorious for treating people quite poorly in his business. And isn't it interesting that he died of cancer at a pretty young age, despite having all the money in the world, all the success in the world, and supposedly being a really smart guy? He didn't live an extremely long or healthy life. So, I think we have to look at this and figure out what do we want. And I'm not saying there's right or wrong. I mean, Steve Jobs changed the world in so many ways. But, if you're trying to be healthy, if it's something that you find that is important to you, then I think you got to ask yourself, what is it that I really want to focus on?
And maybe if you live longer, you're actually going to accomplish much more than if you burn out and die young.
And one of the things, it's a good point. And I think one of the things that we've tried to infuse in the film series is this philosophy of longevity, the philosophy of health, and what does it mean to live a long time? Because, I think a lot of times in the West, particular, we're sort of turning away from death. We're afraid of death, probably because we're afraid to live, or we forget to actually live, so I think we have to ask ourselves, is it really that important to live to 120 or 150 or 200 or whatever the heck people are trying to talk about these days? Or is it more important to live every single day in harmony, happiness, treating everybody with respect and kindness and these type of things? I think if we can strive for that and put our goal toward that, then however long we live seems to be a life that's worth living, right? Whether it's 20 years or 80 years or 150 years, to me, it seems like how many days can you live in a harmonious way that is in harmony with yourself and those people around you and even the earth, right? Because what I see is people are selfishly trying to get to this old age while really being sort of harmful to themselves, to people around them, and to the planet.
So basically, it's not so much the food that we eat, but probably the values that we have, right?
I think that's perfectly said, and if you have these values that are aligned with, harmony and balance and sort of cosmocentrism, this idea that I'm not the center of the universe, that other things are important, then you start to eat better, right? You eat in a way that is healthy for you. You eat in a way that is healthy for your community. You eat in a way that is healthy for the planet. Right? But right now, collectively, we are not doing that, right? We are spreading pesticides and chemicals all over our food supplies. We have monocrops all over the place. We have these factory farm, animal products. We just have a horrible way of doing things. And so I don't think it's so much of, should we go vegan? Should we go paleo? Should we go keto? Should we go whatever the new diet is? But it's more of, where's the food coming from? How was it raised? How was it grown? What kind of soil was it grown in? What were the processes after it was sort of harvested? And these type of things. This is what we should be asking ourselves. That's step one. And if we're forgetting step one, then step 2, 3, and 4 are irrelevant. I don't care what happens after that. But if it's grown in good soil and it's a whole food, I mean, this seems to be what is the most important. And you're right. I think you said it very succinctly, which is that those are value-based questions. That's a value system. That is not anything more than that. So if our values in the right spot, and this is what you find in these cultures around the world, where you find people living healthy into their 90s and 100s, you find that their value system infuses in everything, and in the way that they grow food, in the way that they deal with one another, the way that they view God or nature. This is a value-based look at life. And so that seems to be where we should be placing our focus if we want health and happiness.
And what are the values of these people? What they value?
They value the simple things. Right? They value the things that we take for granted, right? Where we're getting our water and our food. We don't even hardly question this stuff, right? We just go get it. They value that. They value the seasons. They value change. They value life. They value death. They value connection with each other. They value the earth around them, right? They value time spent with people. So it's quite different. It's the very, very basics in life that they value. They don't value how many, likes they get on Instagram, or how many Facebook friends they have, or any of this stuff, how much money they have. In fact, they value how many people that they can help and how connected they are with the people around them. You find this over and over again, where they basically, one of the questions I asked them, I asked pretty much everybody this. I said, if you could give me one piece of advice to live a long, healthy, happy life, what would it be? And almost all of the people that I spoke with gave some version of this answer, where they said, maintain good relationship with those around you. Don't hold any grudges, this type of thing. So it's a very simple piece of advice, but when you hear it from so many people that are healthy in their 80s, 90s, and 100s, you start to take notice and find that that's probably an important factor if everybody's saying it. They're not saying that you should exercise every day. They're not saying you should eat this food or that food. They're saying maintain good relationships, hold no grudges, help people. This seems to be the important factor.
But if this is true, then why ancient people didn't live to 150 years, for example?
I think this is a question that is very complex. I think it depends on where you're looking. Oftentimes when we cite this or this stat or this idea, it comes from the West, right? The people in Europe, and yeah, if you look at the history of Europe, you'll find a lot of different things happening. You'll find wars that contribute to mortality. You'll find birthing challenges that contribute to mortality. You'll find that I think it was prior to 1850, like it was uncommon to take a bath. Like you weren't supposed to, like it was actually, I think there was one queen that bragged about not taking a bath her entire life. So it was actually looked down upon to take baths. And they looked at the Native Americans who were taking these saunas and baths as sort of primitive people. Like, what are they doing? So, I think we have to look at this a little differently, that perhaps it was their healthy, their health habits that may have been contributing to these early deaths. And so, I would say that the way society is set up and the way people were behaving is probably more of a factor. But if you look at places like, the old Americas, right, where you have a lot of native peoples living, they lived quite a long time. You look at South America in the jungle with the shamanic cultures, they lived a really long time. So I think we have to just make sure that we look at this whole thing in the right way. And it's more, again, a cultural thing than anything else. There are basic practices that we understand that will contribute to health, and they're sort of inarguable, right? And so I think a lot of those statistics from a previous era were a outcome of poor practices by those societies.
So basically, they had the right values, but they just died from not natural death, but from killing themselves, from courage and things like this.
Yeah, this is, I think Western societies have definitely made advancements in some regards. We're able to save people when they get injured, when they get, when we have really disastrous births, we can save that. So, we're much better at saving these dire, scenarios, which from a health statistics, death statistics standpoint, it contributes, right? So we have to look at what we're talking about, which is that in a lot of other societies, they died young or they lived, generally a pretty long time. In other cultures, they didn't live very long because their practices were poor. So it's not a matter of anything other than that. We just have to really understand their culture and their practices. And a lot of times when we cite these statistics where people are living to their 50s, the whole society or cultural practice was not analyzed very well, and so there was a lot of infection because their sanitation was poor, these type of things. So yeah, if your sanitation is poor and you're dumping your crap in the streets, yeah, you're probably going to get things like the Black Plague, you're probably going to get things like, so yeah, it's going to destroy life. So, we just have to look at a lot of these practices and say from a holistic standpoint, and this was the point of the film, is that I wanted to go to these places and talk to them about their entire life. Did you, in 19, when did you get electricity? And some of them said 1960 or 70. So this is an important factor. As we have to look at that. When were you using modern lighting? Well, it turns out they weren't using modern lighting until 1970 or 1980. It's like, well, that's pretty important, to look at. So those are the things that fly under the radar if you don't look deeply at the entire cultural practices. And so, in the 1800s and these type of things, we don't have a great analysis of how they lived. And often we don't look at it from a holistic standpoint.
Yes. But now with the lighting, now we have sleep problems because of the blue light.
Exactly. And so this is actually a new problem for even places like Costa Rica and Icaria, Greece, and Sardinia. They are starting to develop these same problems that we are. and all of a sudden their health is going to decline because of it.
Yeah, my specialty, my dent in the world.
Exactly.
So, what are your personal values?
My personal values. I mean, ultimately, I try to be in the moment as much as I can. I try to be present with who I'm with and where I'm at, and try to understand that I control my state. Right? So to me, this is really my focus. Values can be extended in a number of ways, but I think the big challenge that I have today, and I think many people have today, is that we're being pulled in so many directions. We have emails coming through and Facebook messages, and we have somebody calling us, and we have a calendar with a number of items on it. We've got kids, and we've got bosses, and we've got employees. We have a million things tugging at us. And I think for me, my goal has been to reduce as much of that as I can, be here, be in the moment, enjoy what I'm doing. And if I do that enough, then I think that leads to a good life, a life where I'm happy. And to me, this is the only goal. The only goal for me is to enjoy my life. And I can't do that if I'm trying to set a vision or a goal thinking that I know where this goes. I have no clue where this goes. If you would have asked me 15 years ago where I'd be, and somebody gave me the answer, I'd laugh. I'd be like, what are you talking about? How the heck would I do that? Why would I do that? Right? So to some degree, it's letting go of the outcome and just trying to be in alignment with what feels right, what makes me happy, and spread as much sort of positivity and love and compassion and joy as I can with those around me and everything I touch. So it's quite simple, I think, for me. It's just a matter of trying to be here right now in the moment as often as I can.
This is actually the philosophical point of the Buddhism, I think.
Buddhism has had a very, very big influence on me. I've studied a little bit of it. I've practiced a little bit of it. You find this in Greek philosophy too. You find this in the Stoics. And so I think we have to just, right now, what I see is our cultures and our technologies are pulling us away from ourselves. And so anything that's going to sort of bring us back to ourselves, I think, is important. And so for me, I've gravitated toward that because it's felt right and it's worked. And so it doesn't seem to be too complex when you take that route, but we make it complex with everything that's going on.
Yes, and I think a lot of the cultures which are Buddhists live longer, right?
I would suspect, but the funny thing when you start to get into the deep aspects of Buddhism, and it gets quite philosophically challenging, I would say, but they will tell you that it's all an illusion, that birth and death is sort of an illusion. So they don't have this idea of living long. They don't care about that. It's not a value. And I would agree with that living long is not a value. I think living a long time can be valuable to society because what you have, hopefully, is elders that can impart wisdom to younger people and teach them how to live, the art of living in a way that is beneficial to them. That to me is the most beneficial aspect to the people that live a long time. But to the individual, I don't see a value of living a long time. I mean, again, it's more about how many days can you actually live, right? Not how many years. So how many days can I live today in the moment? But most of us are so far out of the moment that we end up making it to 95, but we only lived a handful of days, mostly when we were a kid because we weren't worrying about stuff, right? So it goes back to some of your friends maybe that say that, no, I'm good, it's all good, don't worry about it. So how many more days can we sort of get like that where we are comfortable where we're at, we were happy, we're enjoying the moment? Even if we have future ideas or goals or places, things we want to do, that's okay. But, it's instead of focusing and worrying about those, it's a matter of identifying those and saying, okay, what do I need to do today to maybe get me more toward that thing that I'm hoping to get. So, the philosophy of Buddhism is very, very fascinating. I do find it very attractive given our modern way of living. I think it's very appropriate because we're desiring so many things. We are trying to get out of the moment and trying to get somewhere else. We're never happy with where we're at. And so just trying to infuse a little bit of that in my life has been very helpful.
Super nice. Super nice. Some companies are pursuing immortality.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
I can only laugh. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to think that humans can live forever. And I'll give you an example. I think there's a number of issues that I have with this. One, on the biological level, okay? There's a number of physicists, of scientists of all kinds that have essentially shown or argued that in order for life, we need death, that you cannot have life without death. Death actually gives back to life. One of my favorites is Walter Russell. If you don't know who Walter Russell is, look him up, because he basically identified the periodic table of elements in chemistry before there was a periodic table. He is credited for identifying all. He's a really, really smart dude. But it's a good argument to say that in order for life to spring up, you need death. And we see this all around us. No animal lives forever. So I don't know why we think we could. Secondly, we are composed of all kinds of organisms. In fact, you are more virus and bacteria than you are human. So what are we talking about when we say we live forever? This means that I don't even know what that means. So most of your function is carried out by viruses and bacteria and fungi and all these other things, protozoans. It's not human. So what we have when we talk about the human is we have the human cell, which has a genetic component. We have mitochondria, which has its own genetic component. We have microbiota, which are bacteria and viruses, which have their genetic component. And then we have the external genetic environment, which is food and all these other things. And all these genetic elements are talking to each other and working out together to figure out how to be in harmony. That's all it is. So I don't understand how we think we can control that whole ecosystem. So that's a problem for me. And then more importantly, philosophically, emotionally, this idea of living forever seems a little ridiculous. I mean, I'm 37, and I would say that I can already see a time in my life where I'm like, all right, I'm kind of tired of this. Like, let's see what's next, right? I can envision that. And if you look at a scientist like David Goodall, who was 104, he actually went to Switzerland to basically have administered suicide, right? He had euthanasia. He was tired. He was done. You know, he was 104. He couldn't move around all that well. All the things that he enjoyed about life were starting to sort of go away. And so he said, all right, let's end it. So I think that what we would see if we had the possibility of living forever, we would see people dying of accidents, like getting hit by a bus, for example. You would see that happen all the time. You would see people probably committing suicide because they're like, all right, well, I'm kind of done, or just letting themselves die. And then you'd see the psychotic and sociopathic people living forever. So I just don't know. I just have a hard time with this whole concept. I think it's a little ridiculous. I think really what it is it's people chasing a lot of money. That's really what it is. It's people with a really, really greedy outlook on life, thinking that we can control life. And I think life is so much more complex. And I don't know that. So anyway, I have a lot of problems with it. I don't think it's realistic. I think it's kind of laughable. I think it's stupid. I think it misses the whole point anyway. Why would you want to live forever if all you're doing is poisoning the planet? You hate yourself. You don't like anybody around you. I mean, this seems kind of silly.
Well, some people, if they have lived forever, there will be probably, for example, Nikola Tesla, or I don't know, Elon Musk right now, people like this.
What I would argue is that those people who you talk about, and I would agree, it would be great if Nikola Tesla were still here. I would love that. He would contribute to society in a profound way. But I think what we would see is that if that was the idea, is that we have all these brilliant people that are able to sort of live longer for the benefit of humanity, what you would find is that we would all get to a point of understanding that is greater than this idea of living a long time, and we would let life naturally take its course. So in other words, I think if we were able to upgrade our consciousness and become more wise as a society, what we would find is we're supposed to die. We're supposed to cycle through. And here's why. Look at the kids born today, okay? And let's say a 15-year-old kid that's born today, and compare that to a 75-year-old man today. They think radically different. The 15-year-old grew up with computers and technology and an idea of maybe, what cryptocurrency is and the blockchain. They can understand the blockchain because they have a child mind right? So you have to understand that even as children, why do children learn languages faster? It's because their brain is operating in a state that is capable of learning, of downloading information much easier. Whereas the 75-year-old doesn't have that brain state as effectively. So we have to recognize that I think children that grow up in a different era think differently. And because of that, they are going to operate differently throughout their life. So this is the cyclical aspect to me of why we have new generations coming up and old generations dying. In fact, there's an old statement, and I'll totally butcher it, but it's essentially that it says that science doesn't advance until, the old generation dies and a new generation comes up, right? This is the idea, is that we kind of need older people to die off and their ideas to die off so that we can have new ideas come up. And this is how the life and humanity starts to evolve and change. So imagine if we had just everybody living forever. I mean, first of all, we'd have a ton of people on this planet. I don't know where we'd all go. I guess we'd follow Elon Musk's lead and start going to Mars or something. But, I just think it's kind of ridiculous. I think whether or not we live forever or extend life into our 200 or 300 year range is irrelevant. I think first we need to figure out how to live in harmony. Right now, we're destroying the planet. Right now, we have wars going on. Right now, we have opioid epidemics and suicides and child trafficking. We have a lot of problems right now. Why the heck are we focused on living forever? Let's solve the problems we have today, which are more than that silly little problem. So our focus, I think, needs to change a little bit. There's much bigger problems, and we're not doing it perfect yet. So the idea of living a long time, to me, seems sort of counterproductive.
What is the goal of life?
That's a really good question. If I knew that, well, I don't know. I think the goal. Well, okay, I'll answer it in two ways. I think the goal of life is to learn, grow, and discover. Life, not the individual. I mean, life as a whole. Have fun. This is the whole goal of life, is just to play. I really do think this is sort of the goal of life. The goal of the individual in life, I think, is to express the individual, to be yourself, find out who you are and express that. That's it. If we can have each person do that, figure out who exactly they are and express that, I think that is the goal of the individual. The goal of the individual is to be a unique expression of the one creator, the one energy. I think that's it. But I think life is here just to play, just to have fun, just to create, just to discover. It seems to be that novelty is this sort of key factor in life, that life itself loves novelty, loves new things. And you find it that it's always adapting and playing. And this seems to be the goal of life as a whole. But if we as individuals can express our unique selves, I think this is a very good endeavor to chase.
Super nice. I think actually we can finish a little bit with this awesome finishing, and I'm going to leave you maybe 1 or 2 minutes to say something to the listeners, and to, after the recording is ready, to all future listeners of the Health Mastery podcast. What are you going to tell them?
I would say figure out what you want in life, who you are, what you want. Really what you want. Forget what society is telling you, forget what your parents are telling you, forget what anybody else in business or anything is telling you what you should want. I think if we can individually figure out who we are and what we want, and then align with that, I think this is a very good thing to follow. Most people, I find, are chasing a ghost. They're trying to find something that is totally out of alignment with who they are and what they really want. So if we can identify really what we want in life, what's important to us, if you were on your deathbed today and you had to reflect on your life, where it was going, what would you sort of tell yourself? What would you think about? So I think this is an important thing that we have to ask ourselves often. What is it that I really want? And am I doing things to facilitate that? And if not, sit with that and figure out what it is and how you can change. Because I think if you can start to align yourself with what you really want, who you really are, this is when sort of the magic of life comes to you, and it all starts becoming a lot of fun. And I think at the end of the day, this is probably what we all look back on and say, did I do it right? Did I follow my heart? Did I follow really what I was here to do? And I think this is my goal, is to get to that point and say, you know what, I lived a good one. That was a good run. I'm ready to do it again. I had no regrets.
Super nice finishing. I'm going to stop the recordings now one by one, so hold still for a couple of seconds. Thank you very much for being a guest. I'm going to include links to everything we talked about in the description, and thanks again.
Thanks for having me.